first of all, autistic people appear to be more easily traumatized, like traumatized by like things in our nervous system have a cause a bigger reaction and therefore can more easily lead to actual trauma style reactions in the body. But then also, if your parents are neurodivergent and they didn't have their needs met and they're traumatized also, like who and your whole extended family is, which is true in my case, like who is going to help you?
ADHD Rewired, episode 542. Since 2014, this has been the podcast for ADHD adults who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. You can learn about our coaching and accountability groups, our virtual co-working community, and more. All at ADHDrewired.com. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Learn more about our offerings, including our monthly live Q&As, get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on a Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, and more. All at ADHDrewired.com. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Hey there, ADHD Rewired listeners. It's been a few weeks since the last episode came out, and I want to give a huge thank you to today's guest, Mattia, who reached out to me and offered to edit our interview. And while I felt a little uncomfortable at first, I've been working on accepting people's help when they offer it. Do you have a hard time accepting help when someone offers it? I think it's something that a lot of us with neurodivergent brains really do struggle with. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to give you a bit of a personal update since it's been a few weeks since you've heard from me. And if you're new, I want to welcome you to ADHD Rewired. And if you don't care about hearing an update from me, fast forward a minute or so. Don't worry, I won't take it personally, because I won't even know. You know, a lot has changed over the last year. As I've shared in recent episodes, I've been working on adjusting to these changes within the ADHD coaching landscape, as well as addressing some of my own burnout. This summer, I decided to reopen my clinical practice and started doing some one-on-one coaching and one-on-one therapy, since I'm not facilitating a group this summer. And I gotta tell you, this break has been lovely. You know, success can be a funny thing sometimes. It made me believe that I can't take breaks and I always have to be number one. I'm here to tell you that that's no way to live, and it will catch up with you. So over the last few weeks, I did 2 weeks of summer fish tour on my motorcycle. I did 3 shows in Wisconsin and then 3 in Indiana. And the 3 that I did in Indiana, I did on my own. And I got to tell you, that time alone was super restorative to me, especially riding the back roads in Indiana on my motorcycle. I realized how much I needed that time for myself. And last week, I got to take my son Gibson into Chicago for a few days to celebrate his 13th birthday. This is all to say that this time away from working on the podcast and being in group has been really restorative for me. And I'm looking forward to getting back to group this fall. So stay tuned to the break for news about our fall coaching groups so you can find out how and when you can register. But now let's get on with my conversation with Mattia. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Matia Mauree. Mattia is an award-winning composer and poet and is the host of the ADHD Flourishing podcast. They also have heads. I don't know what that is.
Hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And this is going to be an exciting episode because we're going to talk about a couple of things that you've actually have taught me. They're passionate about living well with disabilities in a society that does not support differences. To that end, they also help other ADHD creatives and entrepreneurs who want to build a sustainable life around their interests. Mattia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I almost just said welcome back. I love the brain. It simply does not brain sometimes.
Well, you know, you're a podcaster as well. And I was just recently on your podcast. It's always fun to be on the other side of the mic, but now you're here with me, and my brain is also going, "Okay, brain, keep on braining. Here we go." Okay, so when it was a couple months ago, I think, when we first talked, and we were sort of talking about, um, uh, ADHD, and I was, sharing with you, and we talked also about this on your podcast, this sort of, like, weird feeling I have, like, all the signs point to that I'm also probably ADHD, like, there's just the evidence just keeps sort of mounting, but yet I still also have this feeling of, well, I haven't had the official diagnosis or official evaluation. So am I allowed to sort of count myself in there? When we were talking about this, you had shared a term with me that was not familiar with, and that is the term monotropism. Can you explain what monotropism is, and sort of explain the like how it applies to both ADHD and ADHD?
Yeah, so monotropism was uh, come up as an explanation for autism because the medical explanation for autism actually doesn't cover the experience. And usually, when that happens, when the medical explanation doesn't make sense, they keep looking or keep developing. But in this case, they've just said, like, nope, this is what autism is, but it doesn't actually describe everybody's experience. It definitely doesn't cover everything. So the original goal of the theory of, or as from England originally, and I'm pretty sure they say monotropism. That's I've heard it said both ways. And you'll probably hear me say it both ways. It's basically this idea that autistic people in particular have a narrower field of capacity for what they can focus on at once and still feel okay. That's like the kind of simplest way of putting it. So we tend to find ourselves in attention tunnels, and there are upsides to that. We get into flow states more easily, for example, but then we can get really distressed when we're forced to transition to a completely different mode of thinking or relating. Or I mean, my most extreme example is if I've been composing all day, if I've managed to get into a flow state for 4 straight hours, I cannot become social.
Mm.
I can't. And it's not just a transition time thing. It's like my brain got into a certain mode and it is stuck there, and it's hard for me to be verbal at all, let alone say go to a party. I did that one time. I like wrote all day and then I went to a party and I got there and I was like, what is happening? I need to go hide at the bathroom
Like, I'm so relating to
until I
this.
can go home.
And how describe how is this different than just hyperfocus with just ADHD?
So, fun fact, so far as it's been studied, there have been a handful of validation studies for like the original model of monotropism. ADHD folks are more monotropic than the average population. So it's basically ADHD folks are more monotropic than autistic folks, and then ADHD folks are the most monotropic, which is very, very interesting in that, we might eventually be moving towards some kind of, I've heard people refer to the ADHD spectrum. And
Hmm.
I think this is part of what they're talking about. Not that, again, I also think autism isn't the best term because it's probably covering an umbrella of a bunch of things that are being lumped together. But, which again, that's where we are right now in terms of describing it. But I think monotropism is also really lovely because people can approach that as its own thing because it's not synonymous with autism. Like you can be somewhat monotropic and still not be autistic. But you might say, get along better with autistic people than a not at all monotropic person.
So I'd be curious to see if there's any research that kind of shows like because I think about, like, some of my sort of ADHD, sort of challenges, and, like, transitioning has always been one of my biggest challenges, and especially if I've been, like, in kind of that flow state for a while, or having working on one thing for a while, like, my brain it gets stuck, like, it literally gets stuck. It's like
Yep.
I know I'm trying to shift gears, but it's just not my brain is not cooperating.
Yeah. And that's basically what monotropism feels like. So a lot of people, if you just heard the idea, oh, you have a narrower set of interests. They're like, no, and I'm interested in a lot of things. I like doing a lot of things. It's not that I literally want to do one thing at a time all the
Mm.
time or that I don't have multiple interests. It's that I want to be able to dive deep and go really, spend as long in the attention tunnel as I want, and then have all the transition time in the world to move on to the next thing. So for me, it's been monumental in thinking about how I schedule because I do a bunch of things, as you heard from the bio, but also I do more than that. I just I don't put everything in there. And I have to think of my life in this more like a sort of project-based way where it's like, okay, I can handle this many different things at once. And then there's the admin overload for those things,
Hmm.
which is its own whole thing, as you know. But if I, for example, if I try to say, and I was doing this for a while, I was like, oh, I'll just, because this is what everybody says to do. Oh, just get up early, practice. I'll practice an instrument in the morning and then I'll meditate. And then I'll, it's like the daily routine thing. That is for a polytropic person. The idea of doing 20 things in order in a day and that being your daily routine, that is not for a monotropic person. I need, and I do this now, I will block off an entire day for one project. And that's the only thing I'm doing that day. I
Mm.
might check my email, I might not.
That's interesting. So I'm thinking about on the occasions where I might, come in and work on a weekend, which I don't typically do, but it's usually because I'm coming in for one specific thing, not like all the things. And usually when I'm doing that, I feel so much more clearer and focused.
Yeah.
When we think about hyperfocus, a lot of people will think about this as sort of like the ADHD superpower of hyperfocus. I'm like, well, it's a superpower, but it's also kryptonite because
Yeah.
you have to understand like the other side of that, and that's
Yep.
that the draining of your executive function and how it's harder for your executive function sort of resources to replentify itself. And I think I just made up a word. But would you say it's pretty similar though in with monotropism, or is it
Yeah.
something that's different about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think hyperfocus is a state that probably plenty of people can access. It's not purely a neurodivergent person thing. Obviously, flow states are things that human beings can access. There's definitely evidence that more monotropic people, like, and which, again, just from what we know so far, because it's not been super studied along,
Hmm.
relative to a bunch of other labels or diagnoses, but ADHD and autistic brains. Another kind of similar theory is the interest-based nervous system. So that's like a very, very similar idea.
So yes, the interest based nervous system that
Mhm.
makes sense.
So that basically if we're interested in something, it's we can just stick with it. And again, that doesn't mean that there's no distraction. Like your brain is still your brain. And the way that I have heard it described that I like is within an attention tunnel, you can bounce around within the attention tunnel. So say, you come into work, you've got one thing in mind, you're like, I'm just gonna do this one task, but you're like, okay, I did that. Well, while I'm here. So you've already put yourself in the space,
Hmm.
which is also why like location and setting and our environment can make such a big difference for us as well because that affects how we get into a attention tunnel and what kind of tunnel we're in and what kind of distractions might come in because it feels okay to bounce around within an attention tunnel, but if you get yanked all the way out of it, that's what tends to feel really bad.
Have you found anything for yourself that kind of works for you to get out of that when you need to?
Oh, to like transition out,
Hmm.
I just don't want to. That's the other thing is it's
You can't make me do it. I don't wanna.
Yeah, I mean, mostly what I usually need if I have to, and I'm trying to build this into my schedule more, especially before social plans, so I don't just cancel the social plans, is I need alone time. I'm not necessarily trying to force myself into a social state of mind. I'm just trying to get out of the work focus tunnel thing. And some things that have helped me around that include like doing a brain dump at the end of the session because sometimes I'm starting to get new ideas and I would maybe just sit and keep going, right? But I'm like, "Nah, my workday is done. I'm gonna try to go do something social." So, I will just let myself, I'll sometimes do it in just voice memos in my phone if I realize my brain is in this mode, because otherwise I go to a social plan and I'm just still thinking about work. So, it's like I physically put myself somewhere else, but my brain is still thinking about it, and turns out most people don't just want to hear me talk about my ideas for my work.
Well, I'm interested in your ideas for your work. So what are you working on these days?
Oh my god. So many things. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day that I did such a good job. I was working with a coach who every coach I'd worked with had been like, "Bro, have you thought about calming down,
Oh my
and
god.
doing less?" And I'm like, "No, actually, I want you to help me do more." And they were like, "I don't know that that's physically possible for a human being." So I finally had a coach a couple years ago who like really got through to me, and this was in part because in 2021, I had 5 classical premieres, which is a lot
Wow.
of music. So I will often be producing in these large bursts because of monotropism. I can like I'm just like, I've got deadlines, I've got commissions, I'm doing it. But basically, of those pieces, I liked some of them a lot more than others. and none of them are like great work. None of them are what people are going to be talking about when I'm dead. And so part of what this coach was able to get through to me was like, hey, just because you're producing a lot doesn't mean it's tied to those bigger goals you have of writing a particular kind of music or like more impactful music, et cetera. And that was just one example. But basically, I did a really good job of cutting things out. I quit the poetry group that I was in that was meeting, so because I've been writing poetry really, really regularly, which is great. I wrote a lot of poetry and I got some stuff published. And then I was like, this is taking so much space in my life and brain. So I like narrowed down. And then this year, I've been like adding things in again, just getting bigger again. So that's why I was laughing. So I am finishing up, have a course called Love Your Brain that was a live thing. And it was basically for ADHD, I mean, mostly creatives, but also entrepreneurs, because a lot of us are. And just sort of like, how do you do the project? How do you get things done and not wanna die? Like, how do we get through the hard parts? That was basically the premise. But really working with this, we've got our cyclical energy. We do have some strengths that we can lean into, but it's really hard. Like, we have to make structures because the world is not set up for monotropic people. So we have to fight for that structure around our work. Anyway, so that was always a live round, and now I'm finishing up the recorded material for a standalone course so people can just have that and return to it, which is great. And, oh gosh, what else am I doing? I mean, I've got some composition projects on the horizon that I'm trying not to think about because they haven't started yet, which is hard. That's the other thing. I'm gonna be producing someone else's podcast actually for the first time. I have clients, and then I also have this space called Like Your Brain, which is a community space. So I'm pretty active in there, pretty much every day. So that's another that takes up a good chunk of my brain. I just took a framing class to frame some of my art, so I was making frames for art. And I've been trying to be more social, which I think of as a project because it takes time.
I'm hearing all of this and just wondering how do you sort of tackle sort of self-care and rest?
Yeah. Oh, I wrote a
Um,
book and I need to like actually self-publish it. It's like pretty much done. I have a medical problem.
I want to hear about the book and probably all the other projects that you haven't even told me about yet. But what I first want to do is take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. So we will be right back. Support for this podcast comes from ADHD reWired's coaching and accountability groups. This fall will officially be our 10-year anniversary of the launch of our coaching and accountability groups. And since then, we have worked with over 1,200 people over 37 seasons. In 2019, we were recognized at the Innovative Program Series at the International Conference on ADHD, and we will be honored again at the 2024 conference this November in California. I hope to see you there. And by the way, if you've been thinking about going to that conference, the early bird special rate is ending soon. So go to chadd.org to register. But that's not what this ad is about. This is about our coaching groups. And when it comes to getting help for your ADHD, experience does matter. And if you think that you learn best through an intensive and immersive, interactive, community based program, and you can commit to 5 to 7 hours a week starting October 10th through December 5th, then join us for the 38th season of coaching and accountability groups. And this season, we're going to be giving you some time back. We're making this season 8 weeks instead of 10, and we're doing this for a few reasons. One, this will help continue to keep the cost of enrollment down. Two, we know how hectic December can get around the holidays. And three, typically during weeks 8 and 9 of our groups, we work on a yearly and monthly planning. So instead of doing our typical sort of abridged version of yearly planning during group, you will be invited and encouraged to attend our popular 5-week yearly planning workshop that we do each Tuesday for the members of our alumni community. Now, I don't want to bombard you with too much information on the schedule and when that all takes place, but it is on the website, so you can go check that out at coachingrewired.com. It's all laid out there. Together, we're going to work on issues like time blindness and using your calendar and to-do lists more effectively. We're going to be working on self care and developing a healthier relationship with our ADHD and so much more. From gaining self awareness and discovering blind spots to fostering more self acceptance and learning how to advocate for what you need in order to show up in life as the best and most authentic version of yourself. Plus, I think the best part of doing this work in a group setting that is part of a membership community is you're going to get to meet a bunch of really cool ADHDers, and you may even make some new, fabulous neurodivergent friends. And as I mentioned this fall, I'm only offering one section, so space is limited. And I've already received several pre registration submissions, and this is all before even officially announcing our fall group. We're going to be kicking off registration on Thursday, September 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern. And just like last season, the sooner you register, the more you will save. You can join us for only $11.99 when you register at any of the first 3 registration events on September 5th, 12th, or 19th. Those are all on Thursdays. All registration events will be at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 Eastern. Or if you wait until September 26th, which is the last registration event, the enrollment will increase to $13.99. Or if you want a private one-on-one registration call with me, I'm also offering that for $13.99. And payment plans are available. So how do you register? Step 1, go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com and add your name to the interest list. And don't forget to confirm your email once you do that so you get the information on how to register. Then go to the pre-registration page that will be linked in the email and complete the pre-registration steps outlined on that page. October is ADHD Awareness Month and group starts October 5th. So plan to celebrate ADHD Awareness Month by getting your ADHD rewired. Take the first step. Go to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back. All right, so right before the break, you just kind of casually dropped, oh yeah, and I wrote a book that you're trying to finish. What's the book?
It's called The Little Book of Loving, and
Hmm.
it's a little bit poetic, but the concept behind it was basically I wanted this sort of I wanted it to feel sort of meditative, and it's about like sinking into a loving state and being able to access that as a feeling.
Is it more like relationship with self and
Mhm.
self-love? Huh.
Yeah.
What was it that sort of drove you to or inspired that for you?
I don't even remember. I've actually this is technically the 3rd book that I've, like, largely drafted. It's definitely the closest to being done. Like, it's in its, like, 4th edit, so I it's, like, it's pretty much done. Um, and actually, I was planning on releasing that. I was, like, going to be self-publishing it, and I, like, had a whole plan for it, and then I was like, "Actually, I need to work on stuff that makes money," and kind of, like, set that down for a little bit because 'cause I'm not expecting it to, obviously, that's not the point. But yeah, I love words. I'm very verbal. I was a hyperlexic kid. So for me, books that I love and have really attached to, and like writers and thinkers and spoken word as well, people that I listen to, there's just this quality in works that I feel like I can return to and like get the feeling that I want. That's a lot of where I get that, if that makes sense, is like words.
Hmm.
So that's something anyway, that's kind of what I had in mind was like I was trying to write something that like created this particular feeling state.
Hmm. What else you going on?
All right. Fun fact. Sometimes I do this periodically where I don't let myself look at anything. I'm just going to write down all of my projects that are technically happening that I have like, that are like in some way active that I have not, you know, officially set aside. Not a single time have I ever gotten the list complete off the top of my head. Not a single time in my entire life that I've done.
It's a great strategy too. We do this in my coaching program when we're talking about our sort of daily and weekly planning. Is it's like before you look at anything, start with what's in your head. Just like take a
Yep.
few minutes and just dump it out of your head, and then go and look at everything.
Yeah.
So your background now. So when did you learn you had ADHD and autism? I know you also shared that you do have a that you feel like you're recovered from complex PTSD and disordered eating. So you've been through lots of shit.
Yeah, my 20s were not fun, nor my teens. Not fun at all. Both of my parents have ADHD, so they were not diagnosed or treated at all, which was also not fun because, things like I got really good at shimmying in little windows as a kid because my parents would have gotten us locked out of the house just over and over and over, just like constantly. So stuff like that, where, it's like very chaotic in that sense. My dad's also definitely autistic. I don't think my mom is. But basically, I knew, but they would talk about my dad being ADD because you can't go to work without shoes on and like
No?
think that there's nothing going on. Like even so I remember people talking about ADHD from a very young age because of that, even though my dad never saw any kind of support for that as far as I know. And then I sought treatment or diagnosis in 20 I think it was 2017. I actually got tested for the first time, like the neuropsych testing, because the year before that, I only bought groceries 5 times. Like, I only went to a grocery store 5 times for an entire and I knew that because I did it so infrequently that it was notable, and I kept track of that and then came to my therapist and was like, "I am not okay." And even when I was really, really, really skinny, nobody ever said anything, no doctor ever thought it was a problem because thinness is so prized in our culture that even when I, like, clearly had a medical problem and, like, did not look healthy, everybody was just like, "Oh, wow, good for you," and I was just like, "I'm literally not eating food."
And what was there an intention behind that?
Uh, I mean, my mom also has disordered eating, so, like, that I definitely grew up with weird ideas around food. I also grew up poor, so, like, part of that was we were not allowed to eat without permission. Like, we were
Mm.
not supposed to go find food for ourselves or, like, eat food without permission because my mom was trying to, like, make things last, basically. And so, a lot of things that potentially go into that. There's also a huge overlap between being autistic and having disordered eating for a lot of reasons, just like the control stuff. It did make me feel good in a certain way to know like, hey, I only have this much food and I can like make it last and like I don't need to eat that much. Which is true because I didn't have any muscle to maintain.
Mm.
And now that I have muscle, I look back and I'm like, I couldn't do anything. Like I used to be so weak.
Wow.
Anyway, so that's its own thing. What were we talking about right before that? I feel like I was going somewhere with that.
Uh, complex PTSD.
Oh, and the getting the ADHD testing.
Yeah.
My therapist actually, when I was trying to get her to refer me, and so the insurance would cover it. She didn't want to. She was just like, you're like doing kind of okay. And I was like, am I though? Like,
Mm.
am I really? And then I missed 3 appointments in a row that I was like genuinely trying to make it to.
Mm.
It was not like one day I just didn't look at my calendar, and so I didn't show up. And when I missed 3 appointments in a row, she was like, "Fine, I'll refer you to ADHD testing." So I did that. And then autism testing I did in 2021.
What
So
was
yeah,
that
very
like?
short version is I was like aware of ADHD growing up, but I didn't really know kind of the broader context or like what else it meant besides being forgetful. And then when I finally started to learn more and I was like, oh yeah, this explains so much about my life. But as I kept going, as you kind of get to this point where you're like, this doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain all the social stuff or like why people just randomly stop talking to me and then refuse to talk to me ever again. And I don't know why. Like I don't know what
Mm.
I did. Um, that
I
stuff.
I feel
Yeah.
that because I've been through that, and it's so painful.
Yeah.
It's so challenging too because we're like, "Help me understand," and um, I think there's a pervasive issue of also people not knowing how to have challenging conversations, around, stuff like that. Like, "Hey, you did this. That really kinda pissed me off for this particular reason." Like, "Okay, like, that would be helpful. That'd help me understand so I can try to do better in the future." Have you always been kinda driven, or is this something that's, like, in sort of later stages of life for you? I mean, you how old are you?
36.
Okay, 36. And, just for the podcast listeners, Mattia doesn't look a day older than, like, 22. Um, but have you always felt so driven?
There's definitely I'm sure there's trauma behind that. I've processed that a lot in therapy. Like, my parents only really gave us positive attention for achievement, basically, pretty consistently. That was and especially because I'm the oldest of 7, it
Uh,
was like whoever had done the most recent, most impressive thing was the one who was getting positive attention, basically. 2 of my siblings were in the National Spelling Bee, one of them got 11th place, I think. One of my siblings, like, went to the Cuban Jazz Festival and played with Chick Corea, like, when she was really young. So, we've all done stuff.
wow.
I was also this is another huge rabbit hole of a topic, but I was homeschooled, which had a lot of downsides, obviously, on the abuse front, but it's nice if you're monotropic because you get to kind of spend your
Mm.
time how you want to. Like, it was very unstructured and kind of neglectful, like, not great, but, at the same time, there were elements of that that really worked for me because I could really, focus where I was really interested in the moment. So yeah, I missed a lot of topics. I still really don't understand anything about chemistry. I never took, like, the sciencey stuff other than physics. But yeah, chemistry and biology, people say basic things. They're like, "Everybody knows this," and I'm like, "Nope, I did
Nope.
not go to school. Nobody
Nope.
has ever said that to me."
Well, I've been through a chemistry class and probably, wore out my welcome going to get extra help with my chemistry teacher, and it's still I barely got a C. It just did not
Mhm.
make sense to me. And then my son, who like his one of his current special interests is the periodic table of elements. So I'm just like, and one of his like life dreams is to discover a new element.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do wanna on the, like, achievement or kind of driven front, like, the the parts of me that were like, "I have to do this to prove that I deserve to live," basically, or, like, to get my emotional needs met, essentially, like, that has died down quite a bit, and I feel like a lot of what drives me at this point and I think about this a lot from an artistic perspective, because as a composition teacher, for example, or when I've taught poetry, I talk about, there's like communication versus expression.
Mm.
And we do both, but as an artist, it's very different to try to express yourself fully in a way that makes sense to you versus to try to communicate something or have the reader or listener have a particular experience. And if you're thinking about a more commercial framework around artistic production, which most of us do because that's the weird world that we currently live in, the communication aspect is paramount because you have to make something happen or make people feel a particular way. It has to make sense to them or they think it's bad art. But I'm kind of bummed that expressive art is so looked down upon almost, even in the artistic world, like in, say, the MFA poetry world, because I know a lot of people who did that degree. It feels like the self-expression piece isn't as it's like they only care about that if they can communicate it in a particular way and make sure that their thing makes sense. Obviously, there are artists who
Mm.
don't do that, and, there's avant-garde music and weird poetry, but, I think about that a lot because right now I keep thinking about, a lot of my drive is for self-expression, but that's literally not as valued in a lot of ways. Because if it doesn't make sense or doesn't come across to people like, the response I get to a lot of my poetry, I think it's some of them, I'm like, "This is super straightforward, the meaning is obvious," and the number one thing I've heard from friends who've read it are, "I love it, I just don't get it."
Hmm. Do you not to put you on the spot here, but do you have any poetry that you'd be open to sharing?
I'm gonna go grab this one, uh, and I can read this. It's pretty short. This one was in Boston City Hall for a year as part of a program. 9 years and counting. No, I did not move here for school. Technically, a trap was laid, and I flew into poisoned honey. Before forced to eat myself for sustenance, I sustained an injury of the blood. Vessels of stolen land, both sides of my family on Mayflower or Fortune, wealth and hound, too strained a history, too thin a broken tane. Home, as I understand it, requires sin.
Hmm. Would you unpack that a little bit for us?
About my family history, I
I I
literally
mean,
have.
I picked
Yes.
up I picked up on some of that. I was curious about some
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
metaphors, like the one
Mhm,
around honey, and then the one around like the that last line, about like home being about like sin, or that was
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, the visuals, I definitely had a visceral response to some of the lines in there, but I'm really curious, how you're thinking through it.
Yeah, well, and the first half is biographical. Like, I moved to Boston technically for a job, but it ended up being a really bad situation and involving a lot of wage theft that I definitely could have sued them for and should
Mm,
have and didn't, because I was, like, too traumatized to deal with things like that. So that was, like, overall a bad situation. Um, and fine. I'll just say this part that the person who, like, created that job basically to, like, draw me across the country and get me to move out to Boston was somebody who had asked me out when we were, like, 13 and I'd said no. So this person had just stayed obsessed with me for, like, a decade.
oh my
And
gosh.
I didn't know that.
Did you know it
So
was that same person or you
mhm.
just you okay,
Yeah, like, we'd stayed in
wow.
touch, but I didn't real and, like, I would have said we were friends, but I didn't
Oh,
realize that
wow.
there was, like, this whole thing. Um
How was that to realize that for you?
I mean, awful, and then also in retrospect, I actually just had this thought the other day. I was like, "How did my parents not step in and, like," because I was describing to them what was happening as it was happening, and any reasonable adult would have been like, "You are putting yourself in a terrible situation."
Mm,
And they were just like, "Cool, have fun, like, good luck." And looking back, I'm just like, I didn't have any, adults in my life basically who both cared about me because my mom doesn't like me, I think, like, that's part of the she just literally dislikes me because I'm autistic.
mm,
She doesn't like my dad either, but, uh and then so I didn't have any, like, figures in my life basically who both cared about me and could actually, like, give me reasonable advice, and so I made a bunch of really bad choices in my early 20s that also then put me in a really bad financial situation for a long time because, you know, all the, like, wage theft, etcetera, like, just being underpaid or unpaid. Yeah, in retrospect, if anybody described to me what I was about to get myself into, I would have, like, physically restrained them from leaving, basically. Like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
did would you say that you have this experience? Because it's something that I've been, kind of, experiencing where there's a situation that, like, at the time, we didn't really think through all the factors, but then, like, once, like, you see that it either upset someone or it impacted you in a negative way, it's like, it's obvious now that you see it, and you're like, "How did I
Right.
not consider those things?" Like, is that something that, like, you experience often?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised that I didn't think all through all that at 21, that makes sense. Like, I'm not mad at that version
Yeah.
of myself. But I think mostly I look back and I'm just like, it sucks that I didn't have anybody to help me make decisions or think through things. And to me, that, it's kind of on the broader ADHD front, like, a lot of the reason it appears that pretty much every ADHD person also has complex PTSD, like, that might be maybe not literally everybody, but, like, it's not good.
Yeah.
It's is that, first of all, autistic people appear to be more easily traumatized, like, traumatized by, like, things in our nervous system have a cause a bigger reaction and therefore can more easily lead to actual trauma style reactions in the body. But then also, if your parents are neurodivergent and they didn't have their needs met and they're traumatized also, like, who and your whole extended family is, which is true in my case, like, who is gonna help you?
Mm.
Like, who is gonna actually give you good advice and, like, walk you through things, let alone financial support, which was just absolutely not on the table at all. But, like, even just verbally, it's just really hard to get good help. And I've had so many therapists who were telling me, I also think this is deeply inappropriate. I've had multiple therapists tell me I was their favorite patient or client, and that I was doing really great, and that I was obviously, like, doing a great job and, like, doing really, really well. And I'm like, I literally might kill myself. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
where I felt like the disconnect. So I'm not just talking about, parents. It's like on a broad scale. I feel like it's been really hard for me to get help, and get people to understand what I need because they're looking at my life going like, "Oh, look, you've achieved stuff and, like, you look good." Like, I don't know, there's, like, a lot of based on appearance. I'll see this in my notes sometimes from, say, like, the neuropsych testing. They're like, "Appears well groomed," and, like, I'm just like, "What? I have to, like, look disheveled to get help?"
Mhm. What do you make of that? Since this is clearly a patterned response that you've gotten.
Just that our society doesn't really care about helping people who don't look awful. There's also, I mean, I don't know why this is coming to mind, but there's like a really strong both society, like there's this like cultural idea, and it's partly based in weird Christian stuff, that basically attractive people are smarter, have better morals, all this stuff. So basically, if you look like what people think of like a together person looks like, they think you don't need help.
It just makes me think how gross humanity is.
Oh yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from ADHD Rewired's virtual co working community at adultstudyhall.com. Jump into our 24/7 quiet co working room or one of our many facilitated co working sessions. It's free to try for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. Go to adultstudyhall.com to join ADHD Rewired's virtual body doubling membership community. And this week, I'm hosting our monthly Pomodoro dance party on Friday, August 23rd at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 Eastern. Join us for two 50-minute work blocks and then get a fun and energizing 10-minute work break after each work block, as I will be your dopamine DJ. Sign up now at adultstudyhall.com. That's adultstudyhall.com. And we're back. A decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, when I was really into the sort of world of autism as a clinician, and was looking at a lot of the research, and so what I'm going to say is this might be outdated, this might not be valid anymore. But I remember reading something about how there's a correlation between facial symmetry, which is connected to attractiveness, and autism. Have you seen that?
I have not. That's so interesting, especially because I'm reading a book about like electricity in the body, electricity signals in the body, and the history of it. I think it's called We Are Electric. Super interesting. And one of the part I just got to in the book is like DNA does not create shape. It says how to make an eye, but it doesn't say that we need two eyes or where they go. And one theory is that it's electrical signals pulling things around that are creating symmetry in the body, and like how where the organs end up and all this stuff. And
Huh.
so just because that's top of mind for me, I'm like, oh, I wonder if us having less neural pruning ends up with more symmetrical faces. But that doesn't really make sense because that happens later. But like, I wonder if there's something around like electricity in utero or something that like,
Huh.
anyway, or maybe if your pregnant parent is autistic, like maybe that would have more of a difference too. Anyway, I have no idea. That is unbelievably far conjecture.
It's interesting because over the last few months, I've been thinking about I feel like I really want to dive back into the autism research, because I feel like just even the last 10 years, I think the understanding of autism has changed so profoundly.
Yeah.
Because I remember relating to so many autistic traits, but never actually considered myself as someone that could have autism, um, until until life just keeps giving me feedback, and then I'm like, huh, wait, that's also autism. Oh,
When life gives you feedback, play a sick bass riff.
I love that. Life gives you feedback. Play a sick bass riff.
I have to live in here all the time. This is happening constantly
I
in
was
here.
gonna say I'm really just fascinated by the tour of your mind. It's because it's fun. It's the interconnectivity between different thoughts, and yeah, and I'm also easily fascinated by things. So which is I don't know, a quality of myself that I actually like, because then I'm usually not bored because I get easily fascinated by things.
I love that quality.
Do you play bass too?
No.
So you play piano.
Yeah.
What else do you play?
Violin and then
Violin,
voice are my main instruments. Yeah.
and classically trained.
Yeah.
That was that was a loaded yeah. So you didn't like the training, or what?
Well, my dad was my piano teacher initially. I actually don't remember starting piano lessons. It started when I was 3, so it's like right around the time I started forming memories. Started violin when I was 4, with like kind of a mean teacher. So, have there's a lot there.
I had a mean teacher too when I was 5, and I think I took
Yeah.
lessons for 6 months. And all I remembered was her name, Mrs. Blackman, and the lessons were in her basement, and it smelled like mothballs, and it was just like, and she used one of those sticks when you made a mistake, like, on your hand,
Oh my
like,
god.
oh, yeah, it was like, oh, it was terrifying, which is why I never practiced what I was supposed to be practicing.
Another thing I realized in retrospect, I would argue with my teacher about, for violin in particular, and this wouldn't happen to me with piano, I would argue about what the note was. He'd be like, "It's an A." I'd be like, "No, it's a C," which are close to each other. It's because I needed glasses, and because I wasn't in school, I didn't get my eyes tested until I put on my mom's glasses when I was 11, and I was like, "You can see individual leaves on trees?" And she was like, "Ah, shit, I guess we should probably start getting your eyes." So I just, like, I
Oh
went
my
probably 6,
gosh.
7 years where I should have had glasses. And I think that's a really good analogy for, like, the life experience.
I was
Like,
that's kind of what I
this
was
is
just
not a
thinking.
social, cultural problem. I have a physical problem that there's an actual solution to, but nobody is bothering to check in with me about whether I'm having this problem because, why would you ask somebody that? And it's a literal perception issue. Like, it's really hard to say to somebody, "Are you having a different experience than other people?" I'm like, "I don't
How do you
know.
know? Right.
How would I know that?"
So, based on everything that you've been through in life, um, it makes me want kinda wonder, how do you now think about success?
Oh, good question. I know from having won things, which are that it doesn't give you emotionally what you think it's gonna give you. I actually have a podcast episode about that. I think it's called "The Disappointment of Success"
Ooh,
recently about, like, a particular thing where like, had a thing in mind that I wanted, and then technically I got a version of it, and I was like, "I feel nothing. I feel nothing." So, like, that's part of it is I know just from experience that you can win awards and still just be like, "Yeah, whatever." I still, like, open the fridge, smell a weird smell, and just decide not to eat. Like, it's not fixing my daily life problems. And then also the other piece of it is, like, what I was talking about self-expression, a lot of what I did when I took a big step back from my work in general was, "Why am I doing this?" Because for a long time, I was doing it because I thought I could create something great. And that was in part from feedback I was getting from teachers. Like, one of my teachers in grad school said he thought I could contribute something significant to American music,
mm,
right? So that's, like, honestly kind of rude to say to somebody because now I have to know that he thought that. That's just sitting there in my brain, not actually a good thought. But, I was like, "E even if I thought I could do that, and even if I put in all the work to do that, and even if I technically had the skill, it doesn't mean that it would actually get any purchase in the culture and actually do what I wanted it to do, or maybe it would after my death and, like, whatever." I think that would be really frustrating to be like, and that's happened to artists all the time, right? They're like,
yeah,
"I'm doing something great. I think it's great. Nobody cares." And then, much, much later, or maybe near the end of their life, something picks up. That's the frustrating thing about the intersection between, like, the commercial, aspect of how we actually get work out there, blah, blah, blah. That's its own whole thing. So for me, I really reframed my work around writing the kinds of things I wanted to be writing, which is technically tautological, but, like, that I will feel good about my work if I feel like my work is expressing what I want it to express and or communicating what I want it to communicate. So if it has the effects that I want it to have. I have a choral piece that might be performed, finally be premiered. COVID's been very weird for choral music. And I hadn't listened to it in a couple of years. I went back and listened to it and I cried at the climactic moment. And I
mm.
wrote it and I was like, "Fuck yeah, I
Oh,
did it."
I
Like,
love that.
that is satisfying. If
I
it gives
love
me
that.
the emotional reaction, it's working.
Oh, I love that. Mm,
So
I
that is satisfying. Obviously, if it gets performed, great. If it gets performed a bunch, great. If I get money from it, great. But, like, for me, having created a moment that can like, get me worked up as the person who did it. Anyway, so yeah, that's a lot of how I've reframed around success.
so is there, I imagine there's a large sort of Venn diagram in this idea, but, with your podcast, ADHD flourishing. So the success and flourishing, are there differences, and where's the overlap?
Oh my god, I don't even know if that Venn diagram is that big. Knowing a lot of miserable, successful people, to me, flourishing is, I mean, at a very basic sense, getting your needs met and also that self-expression piece. I love the idea, this is not my idea, that the opposite of depression is self-expression, and I love that idea. I still don't 100% know what that means or if that's technically correct, but I like it. And for me, part of flourishing is feeling like I get to sink into my interests as a monotropic person as well, having ample time to do that. And then being able to be, I mean, again, as a creative person, like obviously I care about this, but being able to then, sink into my interests and then do something with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean creating a piece of art or, making a work out of it. Like for me, flourishing is in part even just, random bit of conversation about, oh, hey, book I read. Here's a random thought I had. Like that was self expression. I'm not doing anything with it. It's not work, but it feels meaningful to me to be able to take in stuff I find interesting, synthesize it, and then do stuff with it, which is probably why I'm a podcaster now because that's exactly what that is. Very satisfying to me. And success is, there's some overlap with that, but our systems for how we're recognized and compensated for our work are so screwed up at this point. I think it's really hard for those Venn diagrams to overlap very much.
Hmm. Matia Mauree, check out their podcast, ADHD, AUDHD Flourishing. And what's your website?
ADHDflourishing.com. And then ADHDflourishing.com/hello is a good place to go for folks for a few starter podcast episodes.
Awesome. Love that. Well, thank you so much for being on, and it was good chatting with you again.
Thank you.
Hey, if you love this podcast and you really miss getting new episodes the last few weeks, then please consider, if you are able to, becoming a patron. As you might know, I had to make some big cuts to my team this year, and your support can help me hire a new editor for the podcast. Right now, Patreon contributions are down to $522 a month. And to all of our patrons who still give each month or who are on the annual plan, thank you so much. Your support has truly been helping me with other stuff, keeping it going. And for everyone else, if y'all can help me get to $1,000 a month, I will commit to hiring a new editor and getting back to weekly episodes within 3 weeks of hitting that $1,000 a month mark. So if I did the math right, if 47 of you listening right now gave $10 a month, or if about 100 of you gave $5 a month, we'll be right there. So if you can do it, please consider becoming a patron, or consider becoming a patron at the $25 a month level, and you can join me for a monthly coaching call that we do just about every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 Eastern. The next one is on August 27th. After that, it's September 24th. And if you are a $25 a month patron, don't forget to add this to your calendar, because we often only have a few people that attend each month. So if you've already signed up for that, join us. And if you haven't, join us and make sure you get that on your calendar. The website, go to adhdrewired.com/Patreon, and that will take you right to our Patreon page. Or if you just go to adhdrewired.com, there is a Patreon link at the bottom of the page there. All right, we will see you next time. Thanks so much.